The Panama Canal has long been a key trade route connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans and moving trillions in cargo, but recently it's been facing some serious challenges. Elon Musk has even expressed concern over what's going on with it. Once controlled by the U.S., it was handed over to Panama in 1999. Since then, rising fees and tensions, including a Trump threat, have made shipping companies unhappy. So what's really happening here? On December 22nd, Donald Trump gave a sneak peek of what's in store when he steps into the White House, and honestly, it left a lot of people talking. At a rally in Arizona, he didn't hold back on the Panama Canal, calling out Panama for what he sees as crazy high fees charged to American ships passing through. To say his comment shocked some people would be an understatement. Trump's big issue: he argued that these skyrocketing fees are making it harder for American businesses to ship goods between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, hurting the economy in the process. In his view, this could be a big reason why the U.S. economy hasn't been doing as well in recent years. His solution: if Panama doesn't lower the cost soon, the U.S. might just take the canal back. Yep, you heard that right. Trump suggested that if the situation doesn't change, the United States could demand control of the Panama Canal again. He even warned Panama officials to be guided accordingly. Why is this such a big deal? For starters, the Panama Canal is crucial for international trade. It's one of the busiest shipping routes in the world, so if the fees keep climbing, it could have massive effects on global commerce. Trump also pointed out that countries like China might be benefiting from these high costs, while the U.S. is getting stuck with the bill. The canal's strategic location gives China a chance to move goods efficiently, which could put American businesses at a disadvantage. The president of Panama, Jose R. Mulino, didn't waste any time responding. He made it clear that Panama has full control over the canal, and he wasn't going to let Trump or anyone else tell him otherwise. He also stressed that the canal was never going to be handed back to the U.S., and frankly, he wasn't interested in negotiating with Trump about it either. As you can imagine, this sparked quite the back and forth. But Elon Musk, the tech mogul and now a key figure overseeing U.S. government spending, weighed in with his take on why the prices are so high. Sources close to him say that Elon believes Panama's price hikes are a result of several ongoing issues they've been facing. Things like a lack of fresh water, political tensions, security concerns, and other challenges have all piled up over time, and it's been costly for Panama to keep things running smoothly. Elon suggested that Panama might be overcharging American shipping companies in an effort to make up for these financial issues. In other words, it's less about some global conspiracy and more about Panama's own financial struggles. But while Elon's take makes sense from a business perspective, it didn't exactly calm the situation down. Many people, especially Trump supporters, just saw his comments as another example of him being, well, Trump. But for others, this was more than just a few harsh words. It felt like a direct threat to another country's sovereignty. And it wasn't just Americans who were upset. The response from Panama was pretty fierce. President Mulino didn't hold back, expressing serious distaste for Trump's remarks. This reaction took many by surprise, hinting at a deeper issue at play here. It turns out there's a long, complicated history between Panama and the U.S. that goes way beyond just the past few decades. It stretches back over 500 years, starting with the discovery of the narrow strip of land that would later become the Panama Canal. To really understand the weight of what's happening now, you have to go all the way back to 1513. That's the year when Vasco Núñez de Balboa, a Spanish explorer, first crossed the Isthmus of Panama and realized that the land was connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, an explorer's dream. Back in October of 1513, Spanish explorer Vasco Núñez de Balboa made an incredible discovery. While crossing the Isthmus of Panama, he found a narrow strip of land that separated the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans and immediately saw the potential for creating a passage between the two. He told other explorers about his find, imagining that with the right resources, he could build a waterway connecting both oceans. This idea sparked excitement among other explorers since it could save a ton of time for ships traveling between Europe and Asia. Why? Well, Back then, the southern tip of South America was a nightmare to navigate. The seas were rough, and any ships that attempted the journey rarely made it back. Those that did return shared horror stories about violent storms, treacherous waters, and encounters with what they believed were sea monsters. Yeah, it was a pretty brutal journey, too. So, it made perfect sense to explore the idea of a shortcut. Many explorers jumped on board with the concept. But even though the idea was enticing, real progress didn't happen right away. The main issue, the technology just wasn't there. The tools needed to create a canal weren't advanced enough to tackle the job. And on top of that, the land they had to dig through was incredibly tough. Thick jungles, towering mountains, and a brutal tropical climate made things even harder. Most of the explorers who tried to work there weren't used to living in such harsh conditions, and it quickly became clear that building the canal wouldn't be as easy as it seemed. For centuries, the dream of a canal lay dormant. It wasn't until the late 19th century, over 300 years after Vasco's death, that anyone truly tried to make it happen. In 1881, a group of French explorers decided to take on the challenge. By this time, technology had advanced enough to make the task seem possible. The French had recently completed the Suez Canal in Egypt, a huge engineering success, and now they set their sights on Panama, thinking they could build a similar sea-level canal there. They had the right equipment and know-how, but they still had to contend with the same rough terrain that had stymied earlier explorers. The Panama Canal project was taken over by a French engineer named Ferdinand de Lesseps, who had just pulled off a massive win with the Suez Canal in Egypt. Given his success there, everyone assumed that building a canal in Panama would be a breeze. But as it turned out, they couldn't have been more wrong. Right from the start, things went south. Almost immediately, workers started falling ill with malaria and yellow fever. The tropical environment was brutal, and the diseases spread quickly. Within just a few weeks, workers were dying in large numbers, and it became clear that Ferdinand and his team hadn't thought through what they were getting into. The first major hurdle, the climate. Panama's tropical weather meant heavy rain, landslides, and an abundance of mosquitoes. These mosquitoes were the real troublemakers, as they carried the deadly diseases that wiped out so many workers. Unlike the dry, manageable desert conditions of Egypt, Panama's dense jungle was tough to navigate. The landscape was full of uneven slopes and thick vegetation, making it way more difficult to dig through than the flat desert terrain they dealt with in Egypt. Then there were the costs. All these issues, disease, the rough terrain, the equipment needed to deal with it, made everything much more expensive than anticipated. The project became a financial black hole. Expenses kept rising, but progress was slow, and to make matters worse, there was a lot of corruption among the higher-ups, which only added to the growing mess. By 1889, barely 8 years into the project, things had completely fallen apart. Ferdinand had lost over 20,000 workers to disease, and the money spent was gone for good. The whole thing was a disaster, and with no real progress being made, most of the teams working on the canal pulled out. By the end of December 1889, the project was officially abandoned. It was a huge failure by every measure, but less than 20 years later, the U.S. stepped in to try again. This time, it was led by John Stevens, a well-known civil engineer who had a reputation for getting things done. The question was, would Stevens succeed where so many others had failed, or would he just be another name in the long list of those who tried and fell short? Building the canal at the dawn of the 20th century, U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt got seriously interested in completing the Panama Canal. He saw huge potential in having a shortcut between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, not just for trade but for military strategy as well.